We have the next speaker waiting. So Jamie, are you ready for your
I am.
talk?
Yeah,
Great.
can
Where
you
are
hear
you
me okay?
coming? Yes, I can hear you. There was some temporary lag. Probably my son was playing some game or
Video game.
another.
Yeah.
So, hey, where are you from? Like, where are you physically right now?
Yeah, I'm based in the UK and
Yeah.
in the northeast of England. And
Okay.
yeah, that's where I'm dialing in from today. So hopefully the connection's okay.
Yeah, the connection seems to be fine. And your slides are up, and I think that this is going to be a totally different kind of a approach to APIs with
Yeah.
GraphQL and other kinds of interesting things. So go ahead, Jamie.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. Hi everyone. I'm Jamie. I'm a developer advocate at GraphCMS. Today, I'm very excited to share with you and talk to you about federating the content layer and what that actually means from an API point of view and a CMS. Typically, we fetch information from a CMS and we display it somewhere. And I'm going to talk about some of those places where you display it and what this whole federating thing actually means and what we are trying to do in that space. So GraphCMS, we're pretty much built up on three things. We are GraphQL native, and we started as a GraphQL CMS, and that's all we do today. We are GraphQL CMS. We don't have any kind of REST APIs. We are just fully all in on GraphQL, which is cool. Since when GraphQL was first introduced, GraphCMS was probably the first CMS to kind of come along and adopt that technology, ensure how content editors can edit content and make it available through a GraphQL API. So it's great that we still kind of focus on that today. That's kind of at the core, and obviously it's in our name, Graph. And kind of the other thing with GraphCMS is giving content editors, powerful editors, to edit content and use all of the tools that they need to kind of manage that content in a really kind of easy and intuitive way, and allow you as a developer to kind of add things in there and make that experience a little bit better for them, or add some custom editing some editing inputs, make them all custom. We've got some kind of fascinating tools around kind of UI extensions that kind of lends to that kind of idea of customizing and extending on what we give you out of the box, and really allow you to kind of customize it, as you're probably familiar with some other CMSs. So we've got all of that. But today, really, what I want to talk to you about is the third thing on this list, which is content federation. And this really is this idea of seamlessly joining data across multiple services. So, today, even over the last 5 years, we've seen a huge increase of people using different APIs to build. We've had this whole kind of migration to best of breed services and APIs, and we're all kind of using different APIs, the best of breed APIs, to create the kind of front end experiences for users. So how do we bring all of those together? It's a question that many people kind of asking. We're kind of rebuilding the monolith in a way with all of these different APIs. It's fascinating to kind of work with all of this. So I think before we kind of talk about the future, I briefly just want to talk about the past and the present, and again, that future where we see ourselves in. So if we go back to way back when things first started out, we had FTP, we uploaded things. There really wasn't much of a concept of APIs, and when it was mainly in some kind of weird format, XML, SOAP, whatever we used back then. Then there was this kind of slow transition to where we are today. But if we kind of look way back then, there wasn't really much. You really got to kind of think back to what it was like beforehand. We had these file FTPs, and we had really a broken workflow. If we wanted to make changes on a live website, we had to upload files there, and it was just pretty broken, and it was painful to do. So we tried to improve that with various tools to make that experience a bit nicer by having templates and workflows and roles for people logging into stuff. But yeah, it just got a bit messy, I think. So how did that kind of start? We started with this website. We kind of had this CMS that controlled this website, and it was website only. The requirements back then were really, really simple. We have some text or we have some images and we want to show that on a page. We then had a CMS, and that's how it was. That's what you got. You got a website, and that was it. We were all happy with that. But then we all kind of needed this way to manage content, edit content, publish content. So we kind of got this idea of a CMS coming around, and there was many different formats of it way back then. But we ultimately were kind of looking for better ways to kind of manage those digital experiences. And with the traditional CMS, it was predominantly website-based. It was theme-based. We could kind of change headers. We could add links to the header, the footer. We kind of got this, various block layouts that you could kind of add content to. But that was it. It wasn't too great. And kind of, it was really expensive. If you wanted to kind of go outside of that theme, if you wanted to bring in your own stuff and you wanted to make those layouts customized to your business, that was really expensive to do. And we had to kind of hire teams, and then, you kind of, it was kind of often slow. There wasn't kind of any of the flexibility that we have today with the traditional ways. So, and it was often tightly coupled. If you used a CMS, you had to use what they kind of sold to you, and what you did buy from them. Or if it was open source, you got everything. If you were paying for it, you got absolutely everything. There wasn't kind of things you could turn on, turn off. You just kind of had to use everything, and these things were often slow as well. And it was server rendered back then. So we'd load a web page traditionally. It would go to the database, get the content, and then it would render that content. And it was often a bottle. That server rendering was often a bottleneck for kind of growing businesses and emerging markets, where people would kind of want to expand beyond just a website. But that's traditionally what it was. Once we started to look to get content in other places, we kind of had to come up with some different ideas. So we'll talk about that. But some of the traditional ways in the past that we kind of manage content, and some of these are still going today and do fantastic jobs. Some of them have, most of these have APIs now that you can interact with. Joomla, WordPress, Adobe Experience Manager, Drupal, and dozens of others. These today, I would say, are considered the monolith. Yes, some of them have APIs, but at their core, they're still pretty much that monolith where you kind of would add a plugin to enable APIs. It's not API first. So there's tons of different tools, and I think that Headless CMS, all of the different Headless CMSs that are around today, kind of, that's how they started, as a Headless CMS. So kind of requirements were different, and what you got as a content editor or developer, the experience can arguably be better because it was built with that in mind. These traditional ways in the past was it's kind of harder to improve experiences there, because there's so many people relying on those previous ways of doing things and catering for the future. So we've seen great projects like WordPress kind of form into this WP GraphQL, where they've got this kind of headless approach, and that's really cool. And there's a lot of kind of innovation in that area where you can kind of log into separate systems to manage stuff. So really, really cool to kind of see some of those kind of emerging. But I want to talk about a little bit about content delivery. Way back then, we had this idea of making a request to a server. We would get that JavaScript, CSS, and back then, maybe it bundled all of that together and returned it to you as a user. But during that process, most of the time, you're going to be accessing data from a database. So we're having to wait at every single step here, going to the server, kind of compiling those files, fetching them from the file system, and then talking to the database, returning all of that to the end user. This often, everything beyond that request and response often took time. Now, don't get me wrong, you could cache this, but kind of choices back then were, really difficult to maintain, and none of it was kind of built in a way that it is today. The developer experience was kind of poor back then. But this was just how we did things. That's just how it is. The present though, we kind of have this Headless CMS where we can now output content to anywhere we like. All these different omnichannel distribution of content. We have countless of them. We've got mobile, website. I think even my fridge has a display on it. And that can probably talk to an API somewhere telling me that I've run out of milk or eggs or whatever. And that probably looks up to some kind of PIM or a CMS to fetch that content. So this content, we had this Headless CMS we went headless so we could deliver that content anywhere and meet those demands of those kind of destinations grown every single day. And yeah, developers have outgrown those kind of monolithic platforms. We've now got amazing tools and front-end stacks and CLIs that we use to manage content, deploy content, and collaborate on content. We've outgrown that monolithic stack from before. We've outgrown PHP. As much as I loved writing PHP back then, and it's still a great choice today, there's a lot of other choice as well. So it doesn't matter if you're getting started or you're an experienced developer, you can more or less find the tool that you like and you can work with and ultimately, build a business with. You can use that with any kind of headless CMS. We're not kind of bound to using and being tightly coupled to that previous traditional CMS that I was talking about before. So really great choice for developers, and building on the headless CMS is fantastic. And again, today, the headless CMS is mostly front-end agnostic. Yes, a lot of these kind of have limited starters where you get something out of the box that you can kind of get going with. Then it's up to you to kind of customize it and make changes to your needs. But mostly it's front-end agnostic. You get an API, you get JSON. In the case of GraphCMS, you get a GraphQL API that you can make requests to fetch all of the content and images that you need. And then it's up to you to display that wherever you like. Fridges, TVs, wherever. Most of the headless stuff today is CRUD. Like you can create stuff, you can read stuff, you can update content and delete stuff. And more advanced CMS like GraphCMS, well, we give you the ability to kind of schedule publishing. So you might not want to kind of make destructive changes by unpublishing or adding new posts or announcements on, when you're editing content, you may want to schedule it for the future. And that's part of a headless CMS as well. Yes, this was available with traditional, but it's also available headless. So you're not kind of losing anything by going to headless. We've kind of, it's not like that today. And what I really like is it is decoupled. So we can put this content wherever we like, and we can query that content and data wherever we like. And it's completely decoupled from whatever you tell me I have to build with a front end that, it's just not like that anymore. Developer flexibility is fantastic. I can, again, use whatever I need to. And yeah, if we look at this, if we just break this down, these sources, here we've got tons of different sources. Content comes from anywhere. People can be managing content in many different areas, in a CMS, in an e-commerce platform, in a PIM, and then they have that content kind of shown on mobile, website, fridges, TVs, wherever. But this bit in the middle, the custom middleware, this is really, really, really expensive and painful. Quite often it's painful to develop and scale this well, because we're having to build all that kind of logic to communicate between these different services. And yeah, that's expensive to kind of maintain. And there's tons of different frameworks, languages, tools, online services that we can utilize to make that a little bit better. But ultimately, you're kind of managing all of that. Whether you're making a request to a shopping cart API or a PIM, you're having to write some kind of custom middleware to handle that request. And what happens if I got an error? What happens if I've made this same request before? Do I cache it? Do I then pass it back to this front end? And your front end, before you know it, is making requests to, dozens of APIs to get content to display maybe a single page. And we don't think that's good. So yeah, back to this kind of content delivery, we've got this request stack. We kind of moved into this realm of static site generators where we went, okay, well, what if we can get the data when we deploy the website? That we can then just get that data and build it statically and then host it on a CDN and deliver it when someone requests. And that was a fantastic idea. But as your site grew, so did the time to build the static output as well. I have to get data from a CMS, I have to get content, I have to get my templates, and putting all of that together took quite a bit of time. And so did data complexity and modeling and relations between content. Here is just a simple example I pulled from a project that doesn't have too much going on, but there is a lot of kind of lines here in the CRD between different models. And this is a very simple project. So you can imagine as your complexity expands, so does this. And if you're kind of having to fetch data from all of these different things, that can really slow things down if you're doing it in a statically, with some kind of static site generator. So yeah, as I've said, as data sources grow, so does the build time. And what we are kind of looking to do with GraphCMS is really improve what happens beyond that static site generating point. Instead of you having to statically generate your content, why don't you call GraphCMS and we will fetch that data for you and return it? So your front end could be server-side rendering. We're seeing a rise of kind of server-side rendering now. We can get that content, we can return it back to you. We can even cache that and make that available much faster without you having to hit that origin every single time. So kind of, I'm going to speed up now because I want to show a quick demo of actually what this looks like. We think let's remove that SSG step and let's replace it with GraphCMS. We've got this return of the server-side rendering. Now we've got this kind of we've got a huge increase in services like Cloudflare, Netlify, and Fastly. Edge computing is a thing now. We can now do things on the edge when the user, the consumer, requests something from a web page. It's a lot faster and easier now to kind of compute that than it ever was before. So I think we're going to see a huge rise in kind of that server-side rendering. And feel free to pause this video later and go back to this. We believe we've found ourselves in a unique spot where we can be a headless CMS, but also be front-end and back-end agnostic. You don't need to store your content inside of GraphCMS. You can relay requests through it, and we'll kind of handle, stitching all of that together and delivering it to you as a developer. So, what I was talking about, that custom middleware before, we now see ourselves as that middleware. You can control and orchestrate all of that with GraphQL. So I'm going to switch over to my project here inside of GraphCMS. And I'm not going to go too much into detail. We've got videos walking you through this if you're interested. But here I'm designing a GraphQL schema, and I have various models in my schema. I have an actor, episode, and a show in this project. This is let's think of this as some kind of TV service online where we can stream things. I may have a show, and if I go down here, I have the movie database TV ID. So every time I enter a new show, I can add a new ID for my content entry, and I can say use that ID to then relay requests to another service. So let's do this live. Every single time I've done this presentation, it's just been a video. And this is the first time I'm really happy to announce today that this is kind of in a private beta that you can kind of sign up for and kind of give us feedback on. So we're going to do this live. I've not done this live, so hopefully it all works out. And I'm going to go to the movie database. I will just paste in the URL here, and let's just save that. And then we can add in some custom type definitions here. So we can type out, let's just type in this here. Need these. Add another, and we'll add the review. And we'll fetch that down here. So these are kind of the custom GraphQL type definitions that I'm now creating that will be added to my project, and kind of doing this in the schema definition language, where this is kind of added to your GraphCMS project. And yeah, that's all you kind of really need to do to kind of model content that's coming from a third party. So this could be, this is coming from a movie database, but this could be coming from a headless CMS, another headless CMS even. It could come from a shopping cart API, e-commerce platform, PIMS, wherever. Let's just save this and see what happens. Now we've got that saved. This is kind of this connection to the movie database. Now if I go into the show model, what I should see on the right-hand side is if I scroll down to the different scalar types that we have available, we've now got this REST kind of scalar adapter. And we've also got GraphQL, the remote source that I've kind of created here. This is a REST API. You can, of course, add a GraphQL when you're setting that up, and this will become available. So the REST here, what we want to do is, I'm guessing the first thing that we added was reviews. We want to fetch reviews from that the movie database. We want to fetch reviews from there. And when I'm configuring this, I'm going to miss most of this out because it's not important right now. And inside of here, I can go, okay, well, the response that I get back from that third-party API, it needs to be in the format of this custom type that I've just created just by typing into the CMS, and that it's of the type review API response. And hopefully I've got all of this right. And then we can define that path to that third-party API. So let's have a look and see if we can get this. We've got the document TV ID, which I shared before, and then we'll go to /reviews. Then I need to pass in my API key, and then we can create that. So hopefully all of that works. Now we've got this kind of reviews field on this show model, and then we can do the same again. Maybe as we want the similar shows. Again, we can come down here. We'll say that the response will be of similar API response. And here we'll go TV/doc. We'll pass in the ID from the record for the TV show, which we'll use as kind of a reference field between these different services. We'll pass in our API key here, and we'll create that. So hopefully I've not done anything incorrect and this works. Live demos, I guess. We'll switch over now to the content editing for this. And let's just have a quick look at the content that we have. We've got the office here. And if I scroll down, we've got all of the different episodes here that are inside of the CMS. These don't live anywhere else. The CMS, the assets, all belong within the CMS. But you'll now see we've got this ID, which relates to a third-party API. Now, you could enhance this. So right now, this is just a simple input. You could make this a drop-down that's actually searching the movie database to get all the different TV shows, and you can connect it that way. Or you could just kind of get all of the content from there and then enhance it with descriptions and posters and anything else you need, and maybe it's localization. Then what we've now got these two different fields that we've just added. Let's preview and playground the reviews. And this is GraphQL. Okay, so what we can now do here is we're getting, I think it was the office that we're viewing. We can get the results and we can fetch the author of those results. So great, this is making a request to the movie database right inside of GraphCMS. So if we go up here, we can fetch the title of our TV show. We could fetch the description of our TV show. So we've got the office, the description, which lives inside of the CMS. And then maybe we could grab the poster, we could grab the URL, we could even add transformations for that. So maybe as we want thumbnails and stuff, we can do all of that inside of here. That's the reviews. And then let's just above do similar shows. And let's then fetch the name of that. And we'll fetch the overview of those similar shows. So here we can see we have the show The Office. We have then similar shows and the results here. And I'm now able to take this content from another API and GraphCMS in one GraphQL request and then make and deliver my front end wherever I want it. So we think this is really, really powerful. It puts the power in the content editor's hands when it comes to kind of connecting third-party tools. We no longer have to kind of rely too much on a developer to kind of orchestrate all of this. All your development team would do is handle what I've shown you in the content editor, in the schema editor, where you connect those fields, add your API keys. Once that's done, the rest can be left to you as a content editor. So hopefully you found that interesting. I'm really excited to show this today in action, and I'd be super happy to answer any questions. And of course, head on over to graphcms.com where you can request a demo and get access to this and play around with it yourself.
Thank you, Jamie. If we kind of draw this GraphQL and see on an overview level, like a bigger perspective, so how do you see, when the theme of this conference is connecting physical with digital, that are there any possibilities to kind of use GraphQL-based things and maybe GraphQL-based CMSs in IoT or any kind of embedded systems or in context with?
Yeah, for sure. You cut out a bit there, but I think I got the gist of the question. Kind of connecting the physical and digital aspect of things here. I think this works really well. All GraphQL ultimately is a data access layer. So you can add those kind of different APIs in the background, and you could use GraphCMS to kind of orchestrate that communication. So if you're in a physical, maybe as I ask I won't say it, but my smart IoT device, I will ask, what is the recommended or similar TV shows to The Office? Then that request could be almost sent to GraphCMS, and the GraphQL connections to the REST APIs or the other GraphQL APIs can return that data all in that one request, so that IoT devices a little bit easier to build and maintain because it's not having to kind of handle communication individually, install tons of different SDKs, create tons of different API keys locally, and upload that to Lambdas, which we already know have kind of a small size, and there's kind of limits on them. We can offload a lot of the work to GraphCMS in this case to kind of handle that. So I think there's huge advantages to use this in the real world.
So could you say that GraphCMS, or this kind of a middleware approach, would be like first combining a bunch of backend APIs and maybe doing it so that there's like, I only want this much of attributes, for example, or this particular endpoint that combines stuff, and then that is like, because the IoT devices are basically able to show maybe one tiny little set of characters, or they have that memory. So that would be the middleware approach that you were talking about.
Of course, yeah.
So that's an interesting perspective to that. And I have to say, my husband has this I don't know what it is, but it's cleaning our masks basically, and there's a lot of devices involved, and he came up with this API that basically has like just a way to put it on and off and read some data there, and I think that's kind of summarizes some of the problems we have with IoT devices. But hey, I think I'm looking at the chat all the time here, and there are no questions to you at the time, but maybe some of the questions will show up and you can pick them up from the chat. But otherwise, thank you, Jamie.